3 months later, deep in the jungles of Viet Nam, I remember traveling up and down the coast, going after village after village. I remember the chaos and the brutality. And then I remember one incident. It was special for me. It was a little village. It was a village that was so small, it didn't seem to be really of any significance to anyone that I could remember. We set it in our sights, sailed up offshore, we bombed it. We bombed it so bad with rockets that no one could have possibly survived. My job on the bridge was to help range and direct the rockets to make sure that the rockets hit their targets. When the rockets left the launches, we knew that all of the gooks were dead. Gooks, that was a word that we used for the North Vietnamese. You see, the government, in their training, recognized that if we started to think of the enemy as people, that we'd be in trouble and we wouldn't be able to ravage on them the punishment that we felt they deserved. So they would come up with pet names, very similar to the catchwords of Krauts for the Germans or Nips for the Japanese. And today, even society comes up with words like fetus or tissue structure for unborn babies, all in an effort to cover up the humanity of the act so that we were free to act, free to do whatever we would, and then be able to discuss it in a strategic way to think of how we could do better tomorrow. When the smoke finally cleared the village, our hearts were pounding. My own chest was swelling in pride. There wasn't one building standing. It didn't seem that there was one person left alive. And then all of a sudden, a little sampan, which is a small reed canoe, probably big enough for 1 or 2 people, came out of the brush. And I remember seeing everyone rush to the side of the ship, guns trained, ready to kill again. And I remember thinking, it was just like a pack of roan sharks, ready to pick up the last pieces of flesh after the feeding frenzy was over. And there, huddled in the bottom of that little small sampan, was a little bit of a woman, maybe 4'2", maybe 90 pounds. Blood spattered, her arms were torn, and she was still clutching her little 6-month-old son. The mother was crying desperately for her son. His face was half blown off. She didn't have any hope but us. Here in the midst of the jungles, the medics grabbed them and brought them to the sick bay on the ship. There was nothing they could do for them. We rushed them off to a hospital ship that was nearby. They both died. We were their last hope for life, but what she never knew was that we were also their assassins. This day, we were sure that we had hit the wrong village. We scoured the village for other survivors, but all of the rest was simply reduced to arms, to legs, to pulp, and to ashes. And then the pain of reality finally hit. For the first time in 6 or 7 years, I remember looking up to heaven. God, how could you let this happen? How can you let this madness continue? So many women, children, grandparents. Once they were people, now nothing but shreds. And I was the one that did it. I stayed in Vietnam for another 10 or 11 months, and I became hardened to all of it. I was seeking revenge on all of those that I was told caused the war. I hated them so much, but I think deep inside, I really hated me more. I tried to wipe away the pain and the guilt with alcohol, getting involved with drugs and sex and danger, and maybe even a death wish. I became boastful and proud, and I returned to all of my arrogance. I believe today that I realize all these emotions were simply an attempt to cover up the deep hurt that lingered within me, trying to cover up an even deeper sense of shame and guilt. I remember praying, God, how can you ever forgive me? I can't even begin to forgive myself. For me, like so many Vietnam veterans, I remember nightmares, unending nightmares, no peace, the world closing in and nowhere to turn. There was nowhere to run. And then, in a way, I felt the words of Satan ring loud in my ears. For you there is no hope. This world is all there is, and see how it treats you. Look at their eyes. See how they hate you. Get back at them. Take whatever you want from them. If you don't, some rich guy will come along and he'll take them. If someone gets in your way, then just step on him. Life is too short to worry about anyone else. Haven't you suffered enough on account of them? How these words echoed through my heart. Yes, my friend, Satan and all of his demons are really good at what they do. They know how to keep the pressure on. They know how to fill your heart with pride. They know how to make you feel superior. They know how to yank you down to make you feel worthless and inferior. They know how to sense your weakness, and then relentlessly, they constantly pick at you, never giving up. In these years in Viet Nam, I had turned from God as far as I could. I ran around in great rages. Upon returning from Vietnam, I didn't know what to do. There was no place in society for the likes of me. I didn't feel comfortable with people. I still felt that shame and that pain inside over all of the things that I had seen done in the war. I insulted God. I cursed him day and night. I joined an outlaw motorcycle gang. I turned from all of my friends into a life of sex and violence, of hatred, of anger. I had no respect for God. I had no respect for his church. And I had no respect for myself. Again, sex and violence and crime and drugs and alcohol all became a part of my everyday life. My slogan became, "Party for today, for tomorrow you'll die." But for me, it didn't matter. I had already died 100 times in Vietnam, and I remember thinking that even hell couldn't be as bad as the things that I felt then. About a year later, some 29 years ago, God sent a beautiful girl into my life. I fell in love for a second time. She went through hell with me. At the beginning of our marriage, there were fights, there were beatings, there was cheating, there were the nightmares, years of unending nightmares. There were obsessions and parties. And yet, for some reason that only God knows, she stood beside me. She unscrewed my head, dumped out all of the garbage, and over the years managed to put it back on right. I remember times so bad, times when I hated myself so much that I must have been absolutely unbearable to live with. But she stuck it out. Definitely God's gift to bring order and soothing to me. God's salvation at work in me, even though I had turned so far away from him. Even though I had given up on him, it seems that he never gave up on me. A few decent years went by. We were a good match. Our marriage became a matter of give and take. My wife always gave, and I always took. After a few years, things began to get better for us. And I remember a time when I thought I'd return to the church. I felt a calling inside me, and I met a priest, and we began to develop a friendship. He forgave my sins, he blessed my marriage, and we used to chat often. And I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe finally there'll be some relief. Maybe finally I can get back to the world with peace. But not to be. 3 months later, 3 months after listening to my confession, 5 months after we met, the priest decided to leave the priesthood. Lock, stock, and barrel, he packed up all of his gear and away he went. And where did I end up? Cursing myself. I blamed myself for his failure, and I remember saying, "See, God, I'm so evil that you can't even keep your priests after they hear my confession."